The sunlight filtered through the massive windows of Everett Publishing House, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Jonathan Everett stood at the window of his corner office, overlooking the bustling streets of Manhattan. At 68, his hair had turned completely silver, but he stood tall and distinguished in his tailored navy suit. His publishing empire had made him a fortune, but these days, the success felt hollow. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Everett, your 3 o'clock is here." "Send her in," he replied, turning from the window. The door opened, and in walked a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. She wore a simple dress that had seen better days, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. But it was her eyes that caught Jonathan's attention. Deep brown and filled with an intensity that seemed to burn from within. "Mr. Everett," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Elena Vargas. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Her handshake was firm, betraying none of the nervousness that most aspiring writers displayed in his presence. "Please, sit down." Jonathan gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I've read your manuscript, Ms. Vargas." Elena sat on the edge of the seat, her back straight, a small leather portfolio clutched in her hands. "And?" Jonathan took his time settling into his chair, studying her. Most people would have filled the silence with nervous chatter, but she simply waited, her gaze steady. "Your novel is..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Raw, unpolished, but there's something there. A voice I haven't encountered before." A flash of surprise crossed her face before she composed herself. "But you're not going to publish it." "I didn't say that." Jonathan leaned forward. "Tell me, Ms. Vargas, where did you learn to write like this?" Elena's fingers tightened around her portfolio. "I didn't learn anywhere fancy, if that's what you're asking. No MFA, no prestigious workshops, just public libraries and a lifetime of observation." Jonathan nodded slowly. There was something refreshing about her honesty, her lack of pretension. "Your protagonist, she feels incredibly real." "She should. She's mostly me." A hint of a smile touched Elena's lips, the first crack in her professional demeanor. Something stirred in Jonathan, curiosity perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. He'd been in this business for over 40 years, had met thousands of writers, but few had intrigued him the way Elena Vargas did in those first moments. "I'm interested in your work, Ms. Vargas, but it needs development. Are you willing to revise?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Of course. I'll do whatever it takes." "Good. Because I'd like to work with you on this personally." Even Elena couldn't hide her shock at that. Jonathan Everett hadn't personally edited a manuscript in over a decade. "Why?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Jonathan allowed himself a small smile. "Let's just say your story reminds me of why I got into publishing in the first place." Elena stepped off the subway, clutching her manuscript to her chest. The Bronx air was heavy with the promise of rain as she hurried down the cracked sidewalk toward the apartment building she called home. Her mind was still reeling from the meeting with Jonathan Everett. Of all the publishing houses she'd approached, Everett was the most prestigious, the most unlikely to even glance at her work. Yet somehow the owner himself had not only read her novel but wanted to work with her. The skeptic in her wondered if there was some catch, some angle she wasn't seeing. Men like Everett didn't waste time on nobodies from the Bronx without reason. The stairwell of her building smelled of cabbage and cigarette smoke. She climbed to the 4th floor, her legs aching from the long day. Inside her tiny apartment, she kicked off her worn flats and collapsed onto the secondhand sofa. "Elena, that you?" Her roommate Mia emerged from the kitchenette, a chipped mug of tea in her hands. "How'd it go?" Elena stared at the ceiling, still processing. He wants to publish it, with revisions. Are you serious? Mia squealed, nearly spilling her tea as she rushed to hug Elena. I told you they'd see how amazing your writing is. Elena laughed despite herself, some of Mia's excitement finally breaking through her shock. It's not a done deal yet, but Mia, he wants to edit it himself. Mia pulled back, eyes wide. Jonathan Everett. The Jonathan Everett wants to work with you personally? Apparently. That's huge, Elena. Mia sat beside her, brow furrowing. But why would he do that? Doesn't he have, editors for that sort of thing? The same question that had been nagging at Elena. I have no idea. Maybe he sees something in the book. Or maybe... Maybe what? Elena shook her head. Nothing. I'm just being paranoid. But later that night, as she lay in bed staring at the water stains on her ceiling, Elena couldn't help wondering if Jonathan Everett's interest was truly in her writing, or if something else was at play. Men in positions of power had agendas. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Tomorrow, she'd go into their first editing session with her guard up. Jonathan's private office was a stark contrast to the modern, minimalist aesthetic of the rest of Everett Publishing. Dark wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound first editions. A massive oak desk dominated the space, its surface covered with manuscripts and notes. Elena arrived precisely on time, dressed in the nicest outfit she owned, a simple black pencil skirt and white blouse she'd found at a thrift store. Jonathan gestured for her to take a seat in the leather armchair across from him. Before we begin, he said, I'd like to know more about you, Miss Vargas. Elena shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure what that has to do with my manuscript. Everything, Jonathan replied. A writer's voice is shaped by their experiences. To understand your work fully, I need to understand you. Elena hesitated, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. I grew up in the Bronx. My parents came from Puerto Rico with big dreams that never quite materialized. Dad worked construction until his back gave out. Mom cleaned houses until she got sick. She paused, the memories still raw. They're both gone now. I'm sorry, Jonathan said softly, and Elena was surprised by the genuine sympathy in his voice. I started writing stories when I was 8. It was a way to escape, to create worlds where things turned out differently. She straightened her shoulders. I work at a coffee shop 5 days a week. I write every night until my eyes burn. That's it. That's my life. Jonathan studied her for a long moment. And the character in your novel, Marisol, she shares many of your experiences. Yes, Elena admitted. But she's braver than I am, smarter. I disagree, Jonathan said, surprising her. I think you underestimate yourself, Mrs. Vargas. Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, Elena felt truly seen, not as a struggling writer or a poor girl from the Bronx, but as a person with something valuable to offer. The moment stretched, then broke as Jonathan opened her manuscript. Now let's talk about your opening chapter. They worked for hours, Jonathan pushing her to dig deeper, to find the heart of each scene. He was demanding but fair, and Elena found herself responding to his challenges with an excitement she hadn't felt in years. By the time they finished, the sun had set over Manhattan, casting the office in shadows. Same time next week? Jonathan asked as Elena gathered her things. She nodded, exhausted but exhilarated. I'll have the revisions ready. I know you will. There was a warmth in his smile that caught her off guard. You're talented, Elena. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As she left the building, Elena realized it was the first time he'd used her first name. Somehow, it didn't feel presumptuous, It felt like the beginning of something new. Weeks turned into months as Elena and Jonathan continued their collaboration. The manuscript transformed under their combined vision, growing stronger with each revision. Elena found herself looking forward to their sessions, not just for the work, but for the conversations that would often extend beyond literature into philosophy, art, and life itself. Jonathan revealed himself to be different from what she'd expected. Despite his wealth and success, he carried a quiet loneliness that resonated with Elena's own. He spoke of his late wife with tender reverence, of his estranged son with regretful sighs. In turn, Elena shared stories of her childhood, her struggles, her dreams beyond this first novel. One evening, as their session ran late, Jonathan suggested they continue over dinner. "There's a little Italian place around the corner," he said. "Best carbonara in the city." Elena hesitated. This would cross a line from professional to personal, and yet, she found herself nodding. "I like that." The restaurant was intimate and unpretentious, tucked away on a side street. The owner greeted Jonathan like an old friend, leading them to a quiet corner table. Elena felt self-conscious in her simple clothes, but Jonathan put her at ease, ordering wine and encouraging her to try dishes she had never tasted before. "To your novel," Jonathan raised his glass, "and to new friendships." Elena smiled, clinking her glass against his. "To unexpected connections." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. Elena found herself laughing more than she had in years, drawn to Jonathan's dry wit and thoughtful perspectives. When he walked her to the subway station afterward, there was a moment, brief but electric, when their hands brushed, and Elena felt a flutter in her chest that both thrilled and terrified her. "Thank you for tonight," she said, suddenly shy. Jonathan's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "The pleasure was all mine, Elena." As the subway carried her back to the Bronx, Elena tried to make sense of her feelings. He was her publisher, her mentor, and more than 40 years her senior. Any attraction was inappropriate, impossible, and yet she couldn't deny the connection forming between them, transcending age and circumstance. "You're falling for him, aren't you?" Mia asked one night as they shared a pint of ice cream on their sofa. Elena nearly choked. "What? Number, that's ridiculous." "Is it?" Mia raised an eyebrow. "You light up when you talk about him. You've been spending more time at that publishing house than here." "We're working on my book," Elena protested weakly. "Uh-huh. And those working dinners that keep happening?" Elena sighed, setting down her spoon. "It's complicated, Mia. He's Jonathan Everett. He's rich, powerful, respected. I'm nobody." "That's bullshit and you know it," Mia said fiercely. "You're Elena Vargas and you're amazing. The question isn't whether you're good enough for him. It's whether there's something real between you, despite all the differences." Elena stared into her melting ice cream. "Even if there was, what would people say? They'd think I was after his money, or that he was having some kind of midlife crisis." "Since when do you care what people think?" It was a fair question. Elena had spent her life defying expectations, pushing against the limitations others tried to impose on her. Why should this be any different? "I care what he thinks," she admitted softly. "I couldn't bear it if he thought I was using him somehow." Mia squeezed her hand. "Then maybe you need to be honest with him, and with yourself." Jonathan sat alone in his Upper East Side penthouse, nursing a scotch as he looked out over the Central Park skyline. On the coffee table before him lay Elena's manuscript, now nearly ready for publication. He had read it so many times he could recite passages from memory, could hear her voice in every word. He hadn't planned this growing attachment to a woman less than half his age. It wasn't appropriate. wasn't what he'd intended when he decided to mentor her. And yet, he couldn't deny the way his day brightened when she walked into his office, the way her mind challenged and delighted him, the way her determination reminded him of himself all those decades ago. His son David had called earlier, their conversation as strained as always. "Another charity case, Dad?" he'd asked when Jonathan mentioned Elena's book. "Or is there more to this one?" Jonathan had deflected the question, but it lingered uncomfortably. What right did he have to feel this way about Elena? She had her whole life ahead of her. Brilliant, beautiful, with a promising career just beginning. The last thing she needed was an old man's infatuation complicating things. Tomorrow he would tell her the manuscript was ready for publication. Their work together was finished. He would step back, maintain a professional distance. It was the right thing to do. Rain pounded against the windows of Jonathan's office as Elena sat across from him, stunned by his announcement. "Publication in 3 months," she repeated. "But I thought we had more work to do." Jonathan kept his expression professionally pleasant. "Your novel is ready, Elena. You've done remarkable work. The editing team will handle any final touches." "The editing team?" Elena frowned. "But you said..." "I've taken up enough of your time," Jonathan interrupted gently. "You should be proud. This book will launch your career." Elena felt something crumbling inside her. "Did I do something wrong?" "Of course not," Jonathan said too quickly. "This is simply the normal process. Authors don't typically work directly with publishers once the heavy editing is complete." But nothing about their collaboration had been typical, and they both knew it. Elena studied his face, noting the careful distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I see," she said finally, gathering her things with trembling hands. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Everett." The formality was deliberate, a shield against the hurt blooming in her chest. Jonathan winced slightly but didn't correct her. "Elena," he said as she reached the door. She turned, hope flaring despite herself. "Your talent is extraordinary, never forget that." She nodded once, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and left. Outside, the rain soaked through her thin jacket as she walked blindly down the street, away from Everett Publishing, away from Jonathan. Tears mingled with raindrops on her face as she finally admitted to herself the truth Mia had seen weeks ago. She had fallen in love with Jonathan Everett, and now, just when she'd found the courage to consider telling him, he had pulled away. Jonathan threw himself into work, trying to forget the emptiness Elena had left behind. He attended meetings, reviewed manuscripts, made appearances at literary events, all while feeling like he was merely going through the motions. The publishing house that had been his life's passion now felt like nothing more than a building filled with paper and ink. Elena's novel went into production. Jonathan received regular updates, but resisted the urge to check on the process personally. Distance was best for everyone involved. Then 3 weeks before the scheduled publication date, his assistant entered his office with a concerned expression. "Mr. Everett, there's an issue with Ms. Vargas's novel." Jonathan looked up sharply. "What issue?" "Marketing is suggesting significant changes to the ending. They feel it's too ambiguous for commercial appeal." Jonathan felt a surge of protectiveness. "That ending is the heart of the novel. It's perfect as it is." "They're quite insistent, sir. Miss Vargas has been informed of the requested changes." "And?" His assistant shifted uncomfortably. "She refused, rather adamantly from what I understand, but without your direct intervention." Jonathan stood up. "Get me the marketing director, now." Elena paced her apartment, fury and despair warring within her. After weeks of silence from Jonathan, this was how they communicated. through intermediaries telling her to compromise her vision to cheapen her ending for the sake of marketability. She should have known better. In the end, Everett Publishing was just another corporation, and her book just another product to be packaged and sold. The connection she'd felt with Jonathan, the understanding, it had all been an illusion. Her phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but some instinct made her pick up. Ms. Vargas, this is Sarah Klein, Mr. Everett's assistant. He'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning to discuss your novel. Elena's heart raced. Did he say why? Only that it's regarding the marketing department's suggestions. Elena closed her eyes. One last meeting then. A chance to defend her work, even if it meant facing Jonathan again. I'll be there. Jonathan stood as Elena entered his office. She looked thinner than he remembered, with shadows under her eyes that matched his own. The sight of her, proud and defiant even now, made his carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Thank you for coming, he said formally. Elena remained standing. I'm not changing the ending. I know. Jonathan's expression softened. And I agree with you. She blinked, caught off guard. You do? Your ending is truthful. It's earned. I've already informed marketing that the novel will be published exactly as you wrote it. Elena sank into a chair, relief washing over her. Thank you. Jonathan sat across from her, the desk between them feeling like an unbridgeable chasm. I should apologize, Elena, for stepping back so abruptly. Why did you? She asked, meeting his gaze directly. Jonathan hesitated, then decided that after everything, she deserved honesty. Because I was afraid of what was happening between us, of what I was beginning to feel. The office went utterly still. Elena's breath caught as she processed his words. And what was that? She asked softly. Something impossible, Jonathan replied. Something that would only complicate your life, your career. Elena leaned forward. Shouldn't that be my decision? Elena, Jonathan sighed. I'm 68 years old. I've lived my life. You're just starting yours. Don't do that, Elena said, unexpected anger flaring. Don't decide for me. I've had people underestimating me, doubting me, trying to control me my entire life. I didn't expect you to be one of them. Jonathan looked stricken. That wasn't my intention. Then what was your intention when you spent all those evenings working with me? When you took me to dinner and talked with me for hours? When you looked at me like... She faltered. Like what? Jonathan whispered. Like I mattered. Like you saw me. Really saw me. Jonathan stood, moving around the desk to stand before her. I did see you. I do. That's why I had to step back. You deserve better than the complications I would bring to your life. Elena rose to face him. What I deserve is the chance to make my own choices. They stood close now, close enough that Elena could see the conflicting emotions in Jonathan's eyes. Desire, doubt, hope. I'm afraid, he admitted. Afraid of holding you back. Afraid of what people will say. Since when does Jonathan Everett care what people say? Elena challenged, a small smile tugging at her lips. Despite everything, Jonathan smiled back. A fair point. Without giving herself time to second guess, Elena reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his weathered cheek. Jonathan's breath hitched. I don't know what this is between us, she said. But I think it's worth exploring, don't you? Jonathan covered her hand with his own. Are you sure? No, Elena admitted. But I've never been sure of anything in my life. That hasn't stopped me yet. When Jonathan finally kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place Elena hadn't known she was searching for. The launch party for Elena's novel was held at an elegant bookstore in Greenwich Village. The room buzzed with literary figures, critics, and publishing professionals, all curious about the new writer Jonathan Everett had personally championed. Elena stood near the podium in a simple but elegant black dress, a gift from Mia, who had insisted the occasion demanded something special. Her gaze kept drifting to Jonathan, distinguished in his charcoal suit, keeping a professional distance as he chatted with industry colleagues. They had agreed to keep their personal relationship private until after the book launch, not wanting to overshadow Elena's achievement with gossip. Still, Elena caught the occasional knowing glance from those who noticed the way Jonathan's eyes followed her across the room. And now, the bookstore owner announced, "I'd like to invite the publisher of this remarkable debut novel, Mr. Jonathan Everett, to say a few words." Jonathan approached the podium, his expression warm as he addressed the crowd. "In 40 years of publishing, I've had the privilege of working with many talented authors, but rarely have I encountered a voice as authentic and compelling as Elena Vargas's." He spoke about her novel with such genuine admiration that Elena felt tears threatening. This wasn't just professional courtesy. This was Jonathan truly believing in her work. Elena's novel reminds us that great literature doesn't come only from prestigious MFA programs or established literary families. It comes from a life lived honestly, from keen observation, from the courage to tell difficult truths. Jonathan looked directly at her. "It is my great honor to introduce you to Elena Vargas." The applause carried Elena to the podium. As she passed Jonathan, their hands brushed briefly. A small, secret touch, full of promise. Elena faced the crowd, momentarily overwhelmed, and she spotted Mia in the back, giving her an enthusiastic thumbs up, and Jonathan watching her with unwavering confidence. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This novel began as a story I needed to tell myself, a reminder that our lives are shaped by our choices more than our circumstances." Later, after signing copies and accepting congratulations, Elena found Jonathan waiting for her in a quiet corner of the bookstore. "You are magnificent," he said softly. Elena smiled. "It still doesn't feel real." "It's very real," Jonathan assured her. "This is just the beginning for you." "For us," Elena corrected, taking his hand. A shadow crossed Jonathan's face. "Are you sure you're ready for what that means? The questions, the assumptions?" Elena thought of all the obstacles they would face, the age difference, the power imbalance, the cultural divide. None of it seemed insurmountable compared to what they'd already overcome individually. "I've spent my life being told what I couldn't do," she said. "I'm done listening. Are you?" Jonathan's expression cleared, determination replacing doubt. "I am, if you are. Then let's go face them together." Hand in hand, they walked back into the crowded room. Elena felt the curious stares, heard the whispered speculations, but for once in her life, she didn't care what anyone thought. She had fought too hard for her voice to be silenced now, both on the page and in her heart. Jonathan squeezed her hand as if reading her thoughts. "Ready?" he asked. Elena looked up at him, at this man who had seen her potential when no one else would look past her background, who challenged her mind and understood her heart. A man who, despite all logic and convention, had become essential to her. "I've been ready my whole life," she replied. "I just didn't know what I was waiting for." As they stepped forward together, Elena realized that her novel's ending, the one she had refused to change, reflected the truth she now embraced. That love, like life, offered no guarantees, only possibilities. The courage came in choosing to explore them anyway. For two people no one had truly believed in, an old man who'd lost his passion, and a young woman who'd never been given a chance. finding each other was the most unexpected plot twist of all. And like all the best stories, this one was just beginning.